volatile corridor between the Gulf and the open ocean, the Strait of Hormuz has again become a place where words and weapons collide. Over the past 48 hours, two competing narratives have broken over the same stretch of water, one released by Tehran in dramatic video and hard-edged statements, the other offered by Washington in terse denials. Between them sits the world's energy markets, merchant crews, and a fragile ceasefire whose margins are growing perilously thin. What unfolded at sea is straightforward to describe and hard to verify. Iranian state media released footage, they say, shows warning shots aimed at United States guided missile destroyers. Cruise missiles and rockets arcing across the horizon, combat drones cutting the sky, all in close proximity to American warships. Iranian officials described the action as deliberate, staged and calibrated, not an attempt to sink a ship, but to draw a line. Iran says its forces have been watching US warships as they approached the strait through the Sea of Oman, and that those ships tried to minimize their detectability before reactivating systems that Iranian sensors tracked. When Iranian commanders say their red lines were crossed, they say they responded. Iran's public declaration was uncompromising. Iran's army said, as the failure of the United States government to fulfill its commitment in the negotiations, the Islamic Republic of Iran declares the Strait of Hormuz completely closed again. No vessel of any type or nationality is allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Any vessel intending to exit the Strait of Hormuz that crossed the red line between Tenem Island and Minas Port, and any vessel intending to enter the strait that crossed the red line between Kubarak and Poa Port will be met with a severe response from the IRGC Navy and will be destroyed. This is CA Navy out. Those are the words that Iran released publicly, a formal, stark redrawing of access and consequence that leaves little room for ambiguity. Before the missiles and drones, Tehran says there were warnings. Radio warnings were issued, clear, direct, repeated, stay away, do not enter, do not test the ceasefire. That pattern, warning, accusation of non-compliance, demonstration of force, is what Iranian authorities say turned a tense passage into a kinetic moment. From Tehran's point of view, the goal was deterrence by demonstration, to make clear that the Islamic Republic will enforce what it calls its security perimeter and that unauthorized entry will not be tolerated. Washington's account is categorical and direct. The United States denies being hit, denies damage, denies retreat. When Iranian outlets published scenes claiming two missiles struck an American warship near the port of Jask and forced it to withdraw, senior US officials pushed back immediately. US officials said it never happened. CENTCOM, the regional US military command, posted on social media that claims of an attack on a US Navy vessel were false and announced American forces were supporting a newly declared mission to help commercial shipping through the strait. Those denials set up the central problem. Two rival explanations of the same moment, each amplified through state media and social platforms, each plausible to its own audiences, and each dangerously consequential. Iran views Project Freedom differently, as an infringement on its security claim over the strait. Iranian statements since the start of the operation have framed the American activity as a violation of a fragile ceasefire and as military adventurism. State outlets have released maps and operational boundaries, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Navy has repeatedly warned that vessels crossing certain lines risk severe response. That rhetoric has hardened perceptions on both sides and made room for miscalculation. What makes this particularly hazardous is the nature of the weapons involved. Modern Stando, BEF systems, cruise missiles, drones, and precision rockets can be used to send signals without physically sinking ships. Flying a missile to land short of a hull or launching a drone in close proximity can be a way to communicate a threat without immediately triggering a full-scale exchange. But proximity, speed, and the fog of war make those calibrated signals fragile. A misinterpreted trajectory, an unexpected detonation, or a piece of shrapnel can suddenly erase the intended restraint. In a corridor that sees dense traffic, the margin for error is microscopic. The fog is compounded by an information battlefield that runs as fast as the weapons themselves. Iranian state-linked media and social platforms have amplified images and voiceovers that portray an assertive enforcement of Tehran's unilateral boundaries. Within hours, Western outlets and US officials pushed back, saying those scenes were either mischaracterized or fabricated. When national narratives diverge at sea, the F First casualty is often a single verifiable account. The second casualty is trust. The world ends up watching two different seas at once, and there's a human cost beneath the strategic theatre. Hundreds of merchant ships and thousands of seafarers operate in and around the strait. Many of those crews are civilians, diverse nationalities working under stress, sometimes with limited communication to their owners. When a state declares parts of the strait closed and then demonstrates that declaration with live-fire events, or when it claims to have done so, insurers and shippers respond by rerouting, halting voyages, or paying hefty premiums. The result is congestion, spiraling costs, and in some cases, abandonments of routine supply lines that affect industries from food to fertilizers to the fuel that keeps hospitals running. What has changed in the last weeks is not only the heat beneath the keel, but the posture of global actors. The United States has said it will back Project Fair. Edom with military means. Allied states are watching closely and weighing whether to attach their own assets to the maritime construct. Iran, for its part, has doubled down on the message that the strait's security is its sovereign concern and has hinted that other options remain on the table. For commercial operators, that is a signal that the environment will remain unpredictable. There is a third, less visible dynamic in play: escalation by miscalculation. Both sides have incentives to avoid full-scale war. Economic pain, military risk, and diplomatic isolation are heavy costs, but both also have incentives to demonstrate resolve. That leaves a sliver of dangerous possibilities: small tactical actions intended to signal strength, and a reaction that overshoots in time or scale. Naval history in confined waters teaches a blunt lesson: most fights that begin in narrow passages do not stay narrow for long. So, what can we expect in the hours and days ahead? First, a continued left images and claims. Each side will press versions of the story that bolster its own legitimacy and justify its actions. Second, cautious incremental attempts to reopen shipping lanes under military protection. The stated aim of Project Freedom will likely proceed, but probably with heavy escort and limited transits at first. Third, international responses will vary. Countries dependent on Gulf energy flows will push for rapid stabilization and increased diplomatic engagement. Others may hedge or wait to see whether deterrence holds. For voiceover and viewers, the most important thing to watch is whether the two narratives converge toward a single, verifiable account. Independent on-the-ground confirmation in the strait is difficult but essential. Satellite imagery, AIS, ship tracking, onboard logs and impartial eyewitness testimony can, over time, help establish what actually happened. Until those elements come together, the story will be a contest of credibility as much as a contest of firepower. Finally, there's an economy of consequences to keep in mind. Disruption in the strait does not remain local. Insurance bills rise, freight rates jump, and fuel costs ripple through national budgets and consumer prices. Food and fertilizer distribution, critical for many countries, can be affected. For democracies and autocracies alike, domestic pressures soon follow foreign policy crises, and leaders find themselves balancing the immediate demands of national security with the long shadow of economic fallout. In the short term, we're left with two competing lenses: an Iranian narrative of enforcement and deterrence, and an American narrative of denial and mission to restore free passage. Between those lenses are sailors, grain ships, tankers carrying fuel for factories, and the fragile norms that have kept a shipping lane open for decades. Whether the coming days will see a cautious reopening under guarded transits or a further hardening of red lines depend on choices made in command centres and backrooms as much as on actions at sea. The water may be narrow, but the consequences are wide. In the next act of this confrontation, a single event, a confirmed strike, an intercepted weapon, or converse cooperation will likely set the trajectory for weeks or months. For now, the Strait of Hormuz remains both a physical bottleneck and a symbolic test. Will states choose to contain the crisis with calibrated moves and mutual restraint, or will signaling and mistrust snap the fragile threads that hold a global system together?